I was well aware of Fear's constant observations of me. I knew that I couldn't fool him no matter how much I avoided him or hid my true feelings. As such, I made it my personal mission to keep myself as occupied as I could. It distracted me from any horrific thoughts from what may have happened to Rachel. The one time Fear and I made eye contact, I knew that he believed that Rachel was already dead. I absolutely refused to accept that, so I ignored him altogether. It didn't change the fact that I couldn't sleep well, since my dreams were more like nightmares, consisted of Rachel being taken away from me in several forms. I ended up trying to avoid sleep by working on whatever I could. Things have certainly changed since we arrived in New York. We set up a command center of sorts in an old mechanic shop in the southern part of the city. It didn't take a genius to figure out that things were definitely not the same. First off, there was a mandatory curfew at 9 p.m. in effect, something that only the Phantoms would have done. Second, there were Phantom agents patrolling the entire city every half hour, which made it extremely difficult to move from one place to another without getting caught. Lastly, the brief glance we had of the Seeker HQ building showed that it was almost unrecognizable. Several of the windows were either shattered or covered in a dark film. The Phantoms had also set up a video screen on both sides of the building that continuously replayed a message listing out their new rules. It was like the entire damn city was under martial law. I wondered where in the hell was the military. I was once again pacing back and forth, as I literally had nothing else to do. Pete refused to send anyone else on missions for the risk of being caught, so essentially we were sitting ducks until Fear and Claire came back from their recon mission. Speaking of, they set out nearly 18 hours ago. What was taking them so long? I whipped my head around to face Pete as I couldn't take it anymore. How long is it gonna be? It's been almost the entire day since they've left. Pete didn't glance up from his screen.
You know that radio silence is imperative. The Phantoms could use our own tracking tech against us. Agents Fear and Claire are well trained for this, and you know that. They will get the job done.
I bit my lip to prevent a retort from escaping. I couldn't argue with the fact that Pete was right. Despite that, it still didn't quell my worries. I resumed my pacing state as I battled my inner demons. Several thoughts swirled in my mind, and it was increasingly difficult to focus on just one idea. Pete seemed to have grown tired of my restless nature, for he looked up at his screen and stared at me.
Would you please stop doing that? If you've really got nothing better to do, go somewhere isolated. Or, better yet, why don't you go check up on the newcomer?
The head warrior suggested, as he referred to the newly conscious agent. I froze in my tracks momentarily before I turned around and left the room. I decided to do what Pete suggested and made my way to the surveillance room. It wasn't much of a surveillance room, though, as we only had access to the security cameras that were spread all over the mechanic shop. As I stood at the doorway, the agent looked up from his work.
"Oh, it's you,"
he said as he blinked in surprise. I nodded my head in confirmation. Agent Evans, was it? Said person nodded in return.
"Is everything all right?"
he asked in concern. I fully entered the room and leaned against the wall. I crossed my arms and sighed softly. I'm restless. I just want to get this mission started already. The agent made a noise of agreement.
"Yeah, I hear you. The only reason why I haven't bounced off the walls yet is because Pete's given me some blueprints of HQ's rooftops."
I raised my eyebrow in curiosity. Why would he give you those? I asked. A small smile appeared on his face.
"Because I'll be the one to place explosives around."
My eyes widened slightly. That's practically a suicide mission. Are you sure you're up for it? The smile was then replaced by a more serious look.
"I may be no commander, but I'm still a secret agent regardless. Those Phantom bastards made things personal when they killed my colleagues. This is a perfect opportunity for some payback. Besides, you guys saved my life. This is the least I could do."
I was left momentarily stunned at this young man's resolve and acceptance of possible death. His courage gave me a feeling of respect for him. Glad to hear it, I finally said. We need all the help we can get.
"Oh, absolutely. I'm a demolitions expert after all."
Agent Evans replied in his clear Australian accent.
From what I've heard, you and Agent Fear are great additions to the Seekers.
You know our history? I asked, surprised. Agent Evans shrugged.
Just from what I was told, I had a friend whose older sister was in your Seeker Basic class. Let's just say she was very interested in yours and Agent Fear's activities.
He then winked. I could only blink as I wasn't sure how to respond to that. Luckily, Agent Kean came into the doorway.
Sorry to interrupt your flirting session, ladies, but my niece and her antisocial boyfriend are back.
With that, the Irish brute left. Agent Evans and I looked at each other briefly before we left the room for the command post. True to Agent Kean's word, Agent Claire and Fear were back, and looked exhausted. A feeling of relief spread through me, and I felt better than I did before. Their appearances, however, had me concerned. The cloth material that covered Agent Claire was torn all over, and there were bloodstains on it. There were a few cuts on her arms and face, yet otherwise than that, she seemed physically fine. Fear, on the other hand, looked worse. His normally shiny armor was filthy, and there were scorch marks all over. He was leaning against the table, and had a hand pressed against his side. I narrowed my eyes as I mentally reminded myself to ask him about that later. Pete nodded in our direction as we arrived.
Now that everybody is here, Agents Claire and Fear can begin their debriefing.
Everyone's attention was honed in on the two tired agents. They shared eye contact, to which Agent Claire nodded and looked back to the rest of us.
We ran into some trouble, as you can see, but we made it back. When we started out, Agent Fear and I observed the rooftops of Seeker HQ and surrounding buildings. From what we could tell, it seemed that the Phantoms have full control over the anti-missile guns on each rooftop, so an airstrike is out of the question. They've also placed snipers with infrared gear to patrol the area. I'm not sure how we can send someone to set explosives up there without being detected.
That won't be a problem.
Agent Darrow replied.
The Seeker Laboratories developed a suit that would absorb the wearer's body heat, thus rendering him or her practically invisible as long as the Phantoms are wearing the infrared goggles.
Pete nodded his head, and a look of relief passed over Agent Claire's face.
Well, that's one issue addressed. Agent Fear and I then checked the sewage lines. The Phantoms have set up automated turret guns on each tunnel. There's absolutely no way to get past them. Hell, they shot at us. Agent Fear got hit.
I whipped my head to face Fear. You were shot by a turret, and you didn't bother to fall back for medical attention? My friend didn't look at me when he answered.
It was just a scratch. The mission is more important than a bullet wound. Besides, I cauterized it.
My eyes widened even more, if that were possible. Are you crazy? I exclaimed. You could have tissue damage, or maybe even something more serious.
I agree.
Pete added in.
I strongly advise that you have that wound checked before we set out again.
Fear didn't argue back, which really worried me. Normally he would have refused to be checked out by a doctor, but the fact that he didn't suggest that his wound bothered him more than he had let on. God damn it, Fear. Why did you do this to yourself? I thought worriedly. Agent Claire coughed uncomfortably.
May I continue?
She asked. Pete nodded, and I shoved my hands in my pockets to shut me up. The woman let out a quiet sigh of relief.
As I was saying, the sewers are a no-go, same with the main entrance. There's just too many Phantom agents patrolling the area for us to have a chance against them. This mission is suicide.
I slammed my hands on the table, which caused everyone to jump. We're going, no matter what. There's got to be another way. I'm not leaving Rachel behind. Agent Claire narrowed her eyes at me.
Is the life of one person more important than the lives of the rest of the surviving Seeker agents?
She asked.
We can't risk losing more Seeker lives. If we went ahead with this mission, we'd all die. What good would you be to Agent Moore if you were dead?
A silent agreement passed through the room, which made me feel abandoned. We came all this way just to give up? There was absolutely no way I would have allowed that. I gritted my teeth in frustration as I glared at the woman. Said person stared back at me evenly, not at all intimidated by my reaction. I flicked my eyes to Fear, and saw that he was looking at me warily. He relayed the message that if I went out of line, he would put me down. I glared at Fear for a bit, before I looked down and pushed back from the table abruptly. "Alright then," I finally said. "If you're all such cowards that I won't go on this mission, then I'll do it my damn self. I made a promise to Rachel that I'd find her, and I intend on keeping it."
Now wait just a minute.
Pete said.
No one said anything about leaving. We just need to find an alternate pathway inside the building.
"Maybe not you, Pete, but Agent Claire certainly seems to not want to participate in this mission. Maybe we should just leave her behind," I said as I narrowed my eyes at the woman. Fear narrowed his eyes at me in warning, while Agent Kean took a step towards me.
You watch your tongue, boy, because that's my niece you're talking about.
He practically growled.
This may be a difficult time for you, but remember that it's a difficult time for all of us. We all lost someone, but you're the only one who has a chance to possibly save their loved one. You should be grateful that we're willing to risk our lives to save your girlfriend.
His nostrils flared.
Take this as a warning, kid. If you're disrespectful to my niece again, I'll shove my foot so high up your arse that your nose will bleed out shite.
He literally spat the words at me. I just glared at Agent Kean's angry face. After a few minutes, I looked away and crossed my arms. The Irishman's initial anger faded away, and he too looked away and grunted at Pete's direction.
So what do we do now?
He asked. Everyone turned their attention to the head warrior as he placed a hand under his chin in a thinking position. He remained in that stance for several minutes before a light bulb went off in his head and his eyes widened in slight thrill.
We go in through the river. Deep underneath the building's foundation is an underwater entrance that was used for submarines. Due to the bombing of one of the subs 6 years ago, the entrance has been decommissioned for safety reasons. Today, though, it might work in our favor.
Excellent idea.
Agent Darrow replied enthusiastically.
The remaining 2 teams enter Seeker HQ using that entrance, and then they split up once they reach solid ground.
Great plan. Just one flaw. How do we get there? I asked. It was Agent Evans' turn to look excited.
We've got some scuba diving equipment in the back. The tanks have enough oxygen for 5 hours. Hopefully that'll be more than enough for you to swim down and find the entrance. There's only enough for a small team, though. The rest have to go by foot. That could be left to the distraction team.
Pete gave Agent Evans a look of approval before he looked at all of us.
Indeed.
He replied.
Alright then. You've all got your assignments. I suggest you all rest as we will be commencing at nightfall. Dismissed.